Welcome to the Adoption Curve, the show where we explore how leading organizations are transforming their approach to turn technology adoption into a strategic advantage. In each episode, we'll sit down with a learning and enablement practitioner to get their inside story on how they're helping their organizations adopt and maximize their technology investments. Let's dive into today's episode. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We appreciate you carving out some time to do this. I know we were talking offline a bit about where we want to take this conversation. And I think we've talked a few times about our work together, our two companies, and some of the projects that Border States has brought in. But I thought by way of a good way to kind of get started, could you give us a little bit about your background and just kind of what you do there and what your overall experience is?
I have been employee owner at Border States for just over 9 years. I spent 2 years in the business and the last 7 in the learning and development team. I've also, I'm a past president, board member of the North Dakota ATD chapter. So I have a little experience there too. And at Border States, I help create content for departments and different locations that are creating training. I do spend a significant time on software application implementations.
Excellent. Yeah. I think you can see why we wanted to have Sara on to talk through these things. Specifically with the nature of the business, you guys have a good sized organization with thousands of end employees. You have folks in the field. There's some boots on the ground, blue collar construction based work, those sort of things where you've got multiple types of end audiences to try to support. And then you have obviously a large sort of, knowledge worker base as well, office base that sounded like you guys were balancing. So correct. I'd love to unpack maybe a couple of these initial software implementations that you've done. Happy to call them out if you'd like, one that's been brought in. Just trying to understand early days, what did management come down to with the L&D team, right? Were you guys looped in early in that process? Was it very much like a support function of like, hey, this is the thing we're buying and we need help? What was that process initially? Love to understand kind of how those decisions are made or what that looks like.
Early days, I can think of a project 5 years ago where we were plugging in a new software to our SAP system, and it was around shipping and how to manage shipping. And so we hadn't done an implementation with SAP at that time, and we were not included early enough in the process. They approach us with, we have 8 weeks before training needs to launch. And by the way, we're not quite done with the system. We're still changing things. It's tough. It was difficult to create good content that engaged learners, but we did it. We did it on a little bit of creativity and a little flexibility, some iterations. We ran a pilot, and that's still a good practice, and then made some changes and rolled up to the whole company.
I'm sure every L&D practitioner out there can understand expected to do more with less in an unrealistic time frame or a tighter time frame than one would like. If you had your way of sort of prescriptively describing what would be more helpful, speaking to management or speaking to those other departments, what would you recommend as more like best practice? Is it involving the team earlier? Is it in the scoping call? Like what advice would you have for kind of making that a little smoother?
The better the relationship that we've built with each of the IT departments and our branch locations, the more we get called in early to the project. Some of them have come to value our input before they've made final decisions on what the application is going to be. And some of them still bring us in at the tail end and say, this is our training plan. Now you implement it. So it can be tough, but we always approach it with a smile. We ask a ton of questions. Sometimes our subject matter experts believe we're slowing down the process, but they always see fruit, the value at the end. I think that you get better at it. If you work with the same team over and over again, you learn your roles. They begin to trust. They allow you to make decisions that they held very close before. Yeah, it's really fun to build trust and increase that relationship. And they tell their friends. We've never had to go looking for projects. My team, if there isn't a line, so to speak, there's a, hey, you need to work with them. You need to try their tool. It made it so easy. They make the lift better. Yeah, it's great.
Excellent. So yeah, it sounds like the rapport building has to be done through.
It's super important.
The delivery side, but in the beginning, you're realizing it's going to be a little rocky. but you're hoping that, with a little bit of early wins, we can start to build that relationship where there's trust, or maybe they start to, open up a bit more, to share more, to maybe be a little more proactive versus reactive.
Yes.
For any of the folks that are earlier in that process, apart from just trying to do something like be as open and smiling face as possible, any other things you've seen that work to kind of like help break down the barriers? IT in general, difficult department, typically to,
Crack into.
I'm generalizing here, but that tends to be the theme is closely held, very security tight. Any other recommendations or best practices for like just getting a little bit of the like, hey, we are here to help. We're not, we're not the enemy.
Yes. Two avenues that worked for us. The first one, approaching the executive committee. If it is a organization-wide project, then you have champions on the executive committee, hopefully, that understand your value and then can open the door for you to get into the project. And the second avenue would be most of the IT projects have one, if not two or three project managers. And so forming relationships with that person, find out what their favorite soda is, find out what their favorite candy bar is early, and repeat, right? If they know how you work and the value you bring, then they'll include you early in their next project. So those two relationships are the most important.
Bribe them with sugar and other goods and be as nice and big smiling face as you possibly can.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I like to call out on the executive sponsor side.
Yep.
And imagine having someone who can speak broadly about the rollout of enablement and learning, and that we want this to be successful from an investment standpoint, not just in the tech that we're buying, but the use of that tech to achieve said goals and those sort of things. Have you seen anything that those executives have done well in terms of like narrative or communication to the teams around like, hey, we need to make sure that we are equally investing in how this gets executed, not just like what we built?
Have I seen anything that helps? I mean, many times those executives do not attend project meetings. And so looping them in can be difficult, but it's important. And you have to decide whether it's the project manager that is responsible for sending them updates, mostly about the challenges that you're facing, because when you have challenges, it's the executives that can help smooth them over. If it's adding more budget, if it is increasing the timeline, those are the decisions that most time executives have to make. Also, they carry the communication about the change to the whole organization. Sometimes they're not prepared to do that. Project managers or the learning and development team do an awful lot of ghostwriting. This is what we want you to say. And this is how many times, and this is when we want you to do it. Our executives are so receptive and understand the importance and know that their voice carries a lot when it comes to asking about technology change in our organization.
That's a really, really good call out. Something super tactical too. I mean, this is not unique to L&D, but that ghostwriting concept, I'd love to hear, if that's been, it sounds like it's been successful, but just the application of that. We've certainly I've done this for my own executives where it's like, hey, I need your name stamped on this thing. So I'm going to write it for you. Here's what it looks like. Here's what we're trying to achieve. It's been proofread. You go ahead and click the send button. Is that the kind of concept to kind of get the brand and logo of that particular person, but you're taking the work off of them to have to think about it and bring it into words and achieve something that they're not that close to?
Correct. We do it aiming to take work off of them, to lighten the load. Some of them will take what we wrote and turn it into their own language, their own delivery. Others don't. They just hit send. And I think either is great.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. Love that. Cool. In terms of the project management side, you mentioned setting up pilots. Can you talk to me about how you think about that when you're brought into one of these projects? Is that something that the project management team is typically recommending, or is it typically your team where you're saying like, hey, we should look at a smaller base of this first? How do you guys think about that?
They happen. I couldn't take credit for the idea. Although if there isn't going to be one, the learning and development team will be the first one to say, who are you piloting with? I need a list of names, a list of locations. It needs to be included in the timeline. We make sure that it's done. I wouldn't say for sure that it is. I think the project managers understand the importance of pilots and include it in their timeline.
From your L&D perspective, obviously this is a crucial piece, making sure we find what works on the small scale before we start to actually add volume to it.
Yes, included in the pilot, you don't just want champions, right? You also, those that are close to the project, they already know and they love it. You also need those that are a little bit change adverse, that are not going to come on board quite as fast, but you need people that will speak up and say this or why this way. So not only change adverse, but also those that are talkative and will help you, versus the people that don't want to change and say nothing and just bite the bullet and do the job, right? So you need kind of a board of directors in the pilot that will both be champions and help with the change.
Yeah. And imagine some of the learning content you're putting together, guidance, things like this, tutorials, things that are helping them understand what is there, then the how to actually execute this on the new piece of technology they're putting in place, the new processes, what have you. And then do you guys do some sort of is there a peer or like a cohort element where they're able to communicate back to you in that setting? Do you usually do a one-on-one? Any best practices you've seen there for the unpacking the experience with the pilot?
Depends on who they are. Inside the organization, we often use feedback forms, easy free to our organization from Microsoft Forms, right? We often have a hyper channel set up too, a Teams channel that's open that people can use with their questions for hypercare, or they call the help desk. Oh my gosh, training the help desk. Don't forget to train the help desk on your implementation. They come first. The other piece is external. We've been doing some external customer training, and they're not as receptive to filling out a form, taking time to tell you what they thought, but they will show up to a phone call and talk to their account managers, talk to the project team, tell them what they thought, because they want the application to be as good as it can be as well, because they're going to use it. So they do show up in person, but customers don't like to fill out electronic forms.
Yeah, I want to come back to the customer education side of this. I think that's really interesting as we kind of transition through the internal side. The help desk call out, don't want to glaze over that. I think that's a vitally important piece. We see this very often with tutorials, that the most open to documentation tends to be those that really reference the documentation the most. Help desk internally, even those that support customers, having good quality, tactical, very end-to-end experiences explaining how you do something that is not only quick and short, but also has good indexing that's attached to a lot of additional pieces of content in that repository. We've seen this many, many times for people using tutorials and videos and many other things, but really trying to make sure that help desk is your first line of defense. Like without them being there, L&D is going to be the de facto help desk. And you don't.
And we're not the experts. Yeah.
Exactly. Anything else you'd add there in terms of just best practice with help desk or working with them in tandem?
I don't think so. They are eager to learn, assigning them to the courses, including them in the pilot. They've never said no, we don't want to be included. So it's good.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. You also talked about a go date and a no-go date. Can you elaborate on that? I think that was a really interesting concept.
Project managers are usually involved in IT implementations, especially for new software. A lot of times there's a project manager on the vendor side who's helping implement the software and internally at your company. And then the project team looks at you in L&D and thinks you're the project manager too. So it's tough. The 3 project managers, they need to get together and determine a timeline for the whole project. And I believe that is your moment as an L&D professional to say, we need to include a go, no-go date. And it should be a realistic date where you're going to start making training content. However, if the software application team is not ready, if the application is not settled and fairly stable, then you're not ready to start making training content. And so that decision then needs to be made. We're ready, we're going on time, or we're not ready, no go. This doesn't mean we're late. It means we missed our first stretch goal of when we wanted to go live to training, because the go live date hasn't changed necessarily. But we've built in this cushion for learning and development to create content. Because if you don't have a go, no-go date, then the delay in IT for creating the software and working out all the problems and doing data cleansing. Oh my gosh, do I hate data cleansing? When that is still being delayed, then it becomes the learning and development team's emergency to make the content. And you can't do a great job. When it's an emergency, you don't create engaging content. You create the bare minimum and the experience suffers for the learner. I love go, no-go day.
It's really well said. I really like that concept. Back to trying to establish good relationships with IT or your counterparts on these projects, proactively or prescriptively bringing to the IT team at the initial scoping of this project and saying, we're probably going to fall short on some things, especially these early stretch goals. It could happen because of data cleansing and other things outside of the control. We don't want to be in an emergency standpoint. So any other best practices that you'd recommend in terms of laying that out to the IT team? Is it saying like, hey, we just need some space for that first set of content creation that we're going to do? Because we've seen previously that we'd be working backwards otherwise, and we don't want to be under the gun. We want to make sure you've got good resources too. Is that kind of the general talk track you're looking at for something like that?
Yeah. I find that IT professionals like to iterate and iterate and iterate. And so you need to ask often, when is the date that you're targeting for a stable system? Because it will change in every weekly touch point. We think it'll be stable in the middle of the month. Nope, it's now going to be the 27th. They move it and move it. And then not only ask the question, but explain why it's so important for the homepage of the software to be stable before you start recording training. And it's because even creating a training video where they move one important button on the homepage really sets learners, in a tizzy, and it degrades trust. If they're talking about this button and it's not on the page that I'm looking at live, now they're thinking, what about the rest of the training? Is that incorrect too? So it's very important for the system to be as stable as possible. I know I have to be flexible because they're going to continue to make changes, but as stable as possible and as true to the live system before we start recording. Now, if my recording software allows me to go back in and replace steps, have some more flexibility, that's great. But to bring it to IT's attention early that you're looking for a stable system before you start creating content, and that it will take you X weeks from that point before you can go live, that's part of the timeline. You really have to have a stiff backbone too, because they will take your time. They'll continue to iterate on their software when you're supposed to be creating training. It's tricky. But the more you do it together over multiple projects, you learn to work together.
Yeah. Great call out about the trust side of this for sure. We've certainly seen that multiple times where, early days when the learner's first experiencing something or a free trial of a piece of software. And if that gap in the beginning is there, like you said, you're just setting themselves up for failure versus building something where they feel remotely confident in what they're clicking around and they have a good lay of the land. When you layer on new or changes, then there's trust. Like they feel like they have a foundation understanding. But those first couple of videos, if they're missing a core functionality, a button missing on a homepage, things like that, people are going to drop into support and say, like, I'm not seeing what you're seeing. And they're more apt to come in frustrated and explain or ask for explanations versus when things look slightly different, but they're used to like the general basis. We find very often that they're like a little more apt to understand that there could be changes going to the software.
And because the IT team needs as much time as possible to create outstanding applications, then we need tools that allow us to create training content super quick. So AI has been helping for creating audio, flexibility, and being able to fix steps that look incorrect on the tutorial. That's been very important. Also, creating one training tutorial that we can deliver in multiple avenues to the learner without having to go visit each of those avenues to make changes has been important. So if we have one tutorial, we can update it. Because it's in the cloud, then our new hire training is updated already. Our just-in-time references on the website application is updated already. Like, we can make these small changes even with limited time, and that's really important. You have to have a good tool.
We'll do our own shameless plug for Iorad here, but I know that's been a big one for the team, especially with version control.
Yep.
Constantly changing screens or process changes. Hey, I actually need you to follow, this branch, not that branch, those sort of things. Those things do change often.
They do.
And being able to swap out a screen is a lot easier than having to hit re-record and be a video editor in your spare time. Love that. Yeah. You also mentioned the roles and responsibilities when you're doing some of this early kind of project management. How do you guys think about that? I mean, you mentioned in some of these projects, 3 project managers. I imagine telling who owns what has got to be a big, vital piece.
It is important. Imagine getting invited to an IT project meeting. They've been meeting for weeks without you. They invite the L&D team there, and yeah, you're just like, I don't know who's doing what. I'm not sure who's responsible for what. It isn't necessarily that meeting that you decide who the roles and responsibilities belong to. Sometimes an offline meeting with the project manager will help you figure out who's doing what, but it's important. One way or another, establish who is responsible for the content, who the executive leadership is so they can help carry the message. I'm going to name a few more roles that are on the project team. Some of these do not belong on small projects, but the bigger the project, the more scalable it is across your organization, the more people you need to involve and determine the roles that they can do. Some of them are a change management practitioner. Wow. When you can have a change management practitioner on your software implementation team, that's huge. Highly recommend. The operations team isn't necessarily the IT team. So how is the business going to handle their change? They have to be included. Regional HR managers. They're the ones that already understand the daily operations in the branches, in the locations, and how the training will be received and what kind of questions are they going to ask. Include your regional managers for HR. The safety team. When you make a software implementation, the safety team is interested in how you're going to train and what changes are taking place. So include your safety team. That third-party project manager can be the most difficult one. When you use third-party vendors, their most important task is staying on the timeline. And it sometimes is difficult to get them to include a go, no-go date. In fact, it might change the contract. You might have to have your executive leadership look at potential clause in your contract. It might cost more money if they go over time. But these are important conversations to have at the beginning and set yourself up for success versus, reaching out to your executive leadership and saying, data cleansing took too long and now we need an extended contract. And we also need to move the go live date because learning and development needs more time. I guess what I'm looking at is a way to understand what's in my lane, what I can focus on. Do I have to be project manager this time, or can I really just pour my energy into the content?
I think it's interesting. Maybe this is not what you intended to do, but bringing in those other supportive departments that your team is working with, such as the frontline managers, regional managers, the HR folks. Who else is going to be effectively consuming the end content or leveraging the tool that we're rolling out? It's interesting that like IT's holding things in, and they bring L&D in a little late to the game, and then you're saying, hey, I want to bring in these additional departments and bring everybody up to speed. So
Right.
I think that's a really interesting way. We hear very often that the L&D team doesn't get a seat at the table. They don't get buy-in high up enough in the organization. But this is an interesting way to sort of frame that as being sort of the liaison between these different departments, saying like, hey,
I like that word.
I don't want to bring more people into the mix just for the sake of it. However,
No.
we should probably surface the voices of those that are going to be consuming this on the end, to your point, designing with the end in mind. Why don't we get their voices in, even if it's for nothing else than just updates, right? So we don't have to take every single one of their pieces of feedback now, but updates are helpful just so they feel like they're in the loop. So that's not like corporate mandated down on top of them. I think that's kind of what you're referring to there. Has that been the general structure?
Yes, sounds like you've experienced that, Sean. It's not fun. As an end user, you want to be involved as much as you can. There is true magic in having a change management practitioner on your team to help with those messages, to keep the end users involved, build excitement. We had a recent project where we did a hype video. And we used the same video about the change coming, the benefits, the value of this software. We use that same hype video for customers as we did internally, just to, give people a peek of what's coming and kind of take some fear away of the change. It did really help. It was fun.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. Maybe that's a good segue. You mentioned kind of partnering up internally with marketing when we were offline, and some of the tools like a CRM or our marketing tool. And then even the customer facing element in this, in your particular business. I love the hype video thing, because it's like you're getting excitement around a new initiative, a new product, something that feels almost tangible about that. Tell me a bit about how that process went, like partnering with something like marketing. I wouldn't think that would be the first thing that L&D would be doing, but it kind of makes sense if we have some customers involved.
Well, if you begin with the end in mind, you really need the engagement of those end users early. So it is what L&D does. You got to start engagement before you assign the course. Oh my gosh, before I assign courses, I go back to the subject matter expert and I go, do the learners know what's coming? I don't want their first experience of you have to take this mandated training to be from the LMS, from the HR team. This is a business initiative. Did you tell them it's coming? Do they understand why it's being assigned? Those pieces are really important. So yes, on a recent project, we worked with our marketing team. They have about 3 years of runtime with Salesforce and the Pardot pages that are part of Salesforce. And so we utilize tutorials from Iorad that are saved to the cloud, publicly accessible. We embedded them with the embed code on Pardot pages, and Salesforce sent them to our customers and tracked clicks on the links, how many views we had, the engagement of our customers. I understand that Iorad also has an analytics and views of tutorial software, but it was nice that the marketing team could use their analytics and really understand the engagement of our customer. Yeah, that was really fun. I wish I could show you what the page looked like that had the embedded tutorials on it in Pardot with the help of Salesforce. It was great. We look so polished and professional.
I'd love to see that someday. If there's even a screenshot of that at some point, that's really cool. I love that application of it. And the tutorials themselves, were they around just like creating like a simulation of the product itself, or just those walkthroughs, or was it actually like training oriented?
The Pardot page featured the hype video at the top. And then on the same page, we had different tabs they could open based on their use of the new application, because there's maybe 3 different audiences. So they kind of self-selected into the tab where they needed to go. So we personalized it a bit. And then from there, they found there may be 5 tutorials that help them understand how to use a new mobile software.
What I love about this also is obviously the hype video gets people, tapping into their emotions a bit. But secondly, the click around, to your point about making it feel less scary, when you can actually, okay, so it feels kind of like this, it just gives them that little bit of a teaser.
Yeah.
To feel like, okay, well, when this goes live, I've at least understood that this is not going to be in a foreign language. It's not going to be like completely overwhelming. From a learner perspective, you're just out there trying to do your job and keep your head above water. When there's just new dropped on you, it's terrifying. So like those spaces where it's like, oh, okay, cool. This feels like I can figure it out. It feels fairly intuitive. Really interesting use case to tie that in with like a promo or like the hype videos. Yeah, that's really cool. I'd love to unpack that more at some point. Yeah.
We made sure the tutorials were small, they're real short, and that they were titled in a way that the learner who's going to use this new product, I'm stuck here. How do I add an item? How do I delete an item? Those were the titles of the tutorial. So they could come back to the training page, watch that video again, or maybe for the first time, delete an item. This is how I do it, these 10 steps. So we made them short, but also the titles of the tutorials. Our IT team likes to do overview of the homepage. You're like, well, what are they going to learn in there? Why would I open that? It's more important to say, these are exactly what I'm looking for so I can find it.
Really important call out there. Definitely something we hear echoed with our customers and partners. I think there's, especially from an IT perspective, there's a lot on like, well, I'm going to consume this piece of content now, and then I will forever know how to do this thing for the rest of my life, right? I don't think there's a lot of thought around the reinforcement that like, if it's a good piece of content, they're going to want to use it and open it like a lot more, because they're going to want to keep trying and keep reminding and refreshing. Or it might be a process they do like every 6 months. Like they're not going to memorize that, right? Like that's the goal of the content asset. We always see folks trying to break things down into the smallest consumable package so that when they've gone through onboarding and they need that quick refresher, it's like 10 steps or 20 steps. Like it's pretty straightforward. Have you gotten feedback about that in terms of the reinforcement, like going back titled correctly, that helps them feel like they can reference this after onboarding or the first time they see it?
I can't say that we've heard anything back that said this title was super helpful, but that it was available. We've heard that, this being short and accessible was easy. That has translated into, we have some application developers at Boris States creating custom apps for our business. And now with our input, they're including a help page in the app. It wasn't necessarily part of the build from the beginning, but you can picture on your mobile app a little question mark that you push. That's being included, which is pretty awesome. And when it opens, it then features those short tutorials with very specific names about something that I might actually need when I'm stuck. So that's neat.
I love the granular nature of that, just making it super tactical, super applicable for folks to just know, hey, this is exactly what I'm going to accomplish by going through this.
Yes.
That's why marketers focus so much on title and thumbnails and things like that, right? Like that is what gets people to actually take action and motivate. So that's beautiful. I really like the tactical nature of that. Amazing. Anything else that you'd mention in terms of the behavior change piece? I know we talked about some of those components there. Just how L&D helps the rest of the org maybe translate. Like I know, and it sounds like you're this way, as an L&D professional, you care about the end learner. Like you actually want them to consume those learnings so they can do their job better. Not that other departments don't, but I think they get in their own wheelhouse of their own things. Anything else that you've seen be helpful from like a narrative perspective, helping other departments say like, if we're going to change behavior, we have to help them act like we're developing these people. Anything else that's been like a way that you've shined a light on how you've got to have some of the soft skills there and care about the people, not just the tech?
So you're asking about how we're helping subject matter experts care about the experience and at the end. Yeah. I found that the goals of the L&D team are not going to be the same as the goals the subject matter experts have for each project. And so again, the conversation at the beginning and in the planning is really helpful. But for example, subject matter expert might say success looks like going live on the target date. And really, when we care about the experience of the end user, success means going live when we have engaging training content. And so some flexibility in that go live. And when I say flexibility, I mean some protection, because the protection is, it's not failure when we miss the go live date. It's success when we produce an engaging training content and we go live with that. So that's difficult. IT professionals measure success by go live dates, I swear. But when we care about the experience, the other piece is they find success by saying we had 100 people complete the training. And we find success by knowing that they learned a skill and are applying the skill. So a conversation about how we're going to measure the outcomes, it's not just about completing the course. It's are they doing what behavior was asked of them? So yeah, I didn't know that outcome measurement was about caring for the learner, but I think it is. I think it is.
Who knows? It could be an actual business objective and impact people's lives.
Who knows?
In a positive way. Lastly, as we're wrapping up here on that topic of ROI.
Yeah.
Anything else so how have you helped tell that story to leadership, right? Because apart from just like the completion data, the things that we're talking about here, that we actually made an impact. Like, how are you showing to the business that we've generated ROI through this from your team's perspective?
Some of our leaders still like data, and the more we can tell about the story of the data is helpful. One of those data points is the time that our subject matter experts are using to create training. They have day jobs, especially those IT professionals. They have day jobs, and so the time they're spending creating training that I can't do, I don't know how the software works and what the important pieces are. In 2023, we asked subject matter experts to spend 40 hours to create a 1-hour course. And that was quite a lot. And then when they gave it to our team, we'd put in another 8 hours of polishing, 48 hours to create a 1-hour course. And it doesn't all happen in 1 week, right? It's probably over the course of 3 weeks. But in 2024, after we train a subject matter expert to use an authoring tool like Iorad, then they can take 8 hours and they create 4 short videos, 4 short tutorials. They have the learning and development team maybe put it in 1 hour polishing their 4 videos. And then we have really engaging content for the end learner. And it has been really fun to describe the return on investment for time of our subject matter experts, because it means we can implement faster. We can go to market faster. We are not the delay at the end of the project to get it out the door. That has a significant impact. Other ways that we measure ROI include telling our story at least annually. The learning and development team puts together what we accomplished in the fiscal year. And this year we printed it in a little pamphlet, which is super fun for the first year. It's not just a Word document. We do it with the audience of our executive committee in mind, but we share it with everybody who we've worked with over the last year. And it's not just a listing of the number of courses that people completed at the organization. It's the stories of the impact that we had. It's a lot of fun.
That's a beautiful example. I really love that. Also, the kind of time motion study of efficiency between the subject matter experts kind of before and after. Hard to argue with the, X improvement or so, it's time spent, right? With the right tools and the right strategy. That's fantastic. Also, I'm sure a huge level of slack that leadership gives you saying like, hey, this is obviously speeding up the process. So what else can we do, right? What else can we innovate? What else can we roll out and build? And things like AI helping speed those things up. That's incredible. And then that last piece around the highlight reel of the year and having success stories. I don't know that I've heard that before. Just kind of like the internal, hey, this isn't just the stats of what we created, but moreover, the impact that this has had, forming that into something like a marketing asset internally. Another great way to build rapport, right? If somebody, maybe they're not doing a live project with you this year, but next year something's going to come up and it's going to involve their department. And then L&D, like, oh, you guys are the ones with that great story that came out and that great end of year pamphlet. That's a really cool idea. I love that.
So build in equity before we even start, which is awesome.
Well said. Awesome. Well, Sarah, I think you gave us a ton of great tips and tricks here. So thank you for taking some time to share all of those things.
Happy to.
As we're wrapping up here, where's the best place for folks to find you? I know you put some content out with ATD. Where can we send folks?
If you're looking for me on LinkedIn, Sara Madsen, and then there'll be a little Border States logo in the background. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Okay. We'll link to all that as well. Sarah, thanks again. This is super, super helpful. Guys, we'll summarize all these things and put them into some summaries and links for everybody to easily access and be able to apply. So thanks again for being here, Sarah. We appreciate it. And we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks, Sean. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Adoption Curve. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and want more content like this, I highly recommend subscribing to our newsletter where we break down insights, frameworks, and templates from our guests on each show. To access, go to iorad.com/newsletter. Also, make sure you subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. If you could, we'd also love it if you could leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed and got value out of today's conversation. The Adoption Curve is produced by Iorad, the tool that helps thousands of companies make interactive tutorials in seconds. They're shareable in all the tools you use every day. We'll see you on the next episode.